Hello, Silent Husband Club. It's good to be back. Sorry for the long silence. We've missed you. We're working hard to post new stories every day from now on. Settle in. They told me marriage is a fortress you built together. Mine felt quiet, steady, safe until one small truth cracked the stone. I can't father a child. She said it changed nothing. It did. It changed everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the night she came home late. If this opening pulls you in, please subscribe, like, and drop a comment. It truly helps the channel grow, and it lets you know when the next chapter drops. My name is Graham Whitaker, and if you had asked me a year ago what happiness sounded like, I would have told you it was quiet. Not the cinematic kind with violins and fireworks, no. The gentle hum of a kettle at 7 a.m. in a narrow Pittsburgh kitchen. The small laughter that lives in the hallway when two people nudge each other out of the way to reach a cabinet. The sound of a fork scratching the edge of a pan on a Sunday morning while I flip pancakes that never come out the same size but somehow still feel like a ritual. Quiet, steady, safe. That was our life, Sloane's and mine. At least, that's the story I told myself. Sloane Mercer, my wife, my friend, my favorite co-conspirator in all things ordinary, worked at a large firm downtown, on Grant Street, a Class N steel monument to promotions and calendars that never breathe. I worked from home, a software developer with the luxury and the curse of measuring my days in coffee refills and version numbers. We had a rhythm that felt honest, mornings together at the table by the window, afternoons split by our respective obligations, evenings where we met in the middle again, happy to belong to the same home, the same couch, the same worn-in blankets. I thought we had built something other people only pretended to have. 12 months after we began trying for a child, I sat beneath a fluorescent panel at a clinic that smelled like bleach and lemons and the end of a story. A doctor with a practiced voice said a word that still feels like gravel in my mouth, infertile. He was careful, gentle but distant, that medical balance that tells you he has said this before and will say it again. Sloane's hand found mine and squeezed, and I clung to that pressure like a lifeline. It changes nothing, she told me later in the parking garage, breath blooming in the winter air. We're still us, Graham. If we want a family, we'll find our way. She meant it. Or maybe she meant to mean it. I chose to believe her because belief is the first thing a quiet life requires. Something shifted afterward. It's strange, you spend your youth learning how to be careful. Then a single sentence lifts the consequence from your body, and the ground under you gives a little. We put away the prescriptions and the little foil packets and the timers that turned love into an appointment. We told ourselves our future would look different and that different could still be beautiful. I slept easier. She kissed me longer. I thought the diagnosis, brutal as it was, had given us permission to be honest and close in a way that no pill, no calendar, no advice column could ever teach. I thought adversity had braided us tighter. This is the part where I tell you about the signs. I wish I had a single, cinematic moment, a lipstick stain, a hushed phone call cut short when I entered the room. But that's not how quiet lives break. They fray. They fray at the edges before anything snaps. Sloane started working late. At first it felt inevitable. Halcyon Mutual had just launched something that sounded like a merger dressed up as innovation, and she was ambitious in the way that makes you proud to set another plate on the table for someone who's earning their place in the world. Don't wait up, she texted at 6:14 p.m. one Tuesday. Big day. I might be late. The words looked harmless on the screen. I plated dinner anyway and kept it warm. Just colleagues, she said on a Thursday night when she came in with cheeks a little too bright, the faintest ribbon of perfume I didn't recognize trailing her into the hallway. Sloane drank wine. She did not drink late. She was as disciplined with herself as she was with her spreadsheets, the kind of person who treats sleep like an appointment. So when she stumbled once, just once, I blamed the long week and added extra water to the nightstand. It's funny, the things you will excuse when your narrative requires them to be minor. Ambition explains a lot until it explains nothing. The late nights didn't disappear after the project launched. They multiplied. It's ridiculous, she said, kicking her heels off by the door, but we're short-staffed. She smiled then, the tired smile that asks you to be kind, and I was. I have always been. That is one of the better lies I tell about myself, that kindness is the same as clarity. A month into the new normal, I found a small truth that didn't fit. It wasn't an affairs calling card, not at first glance. It was a receipt. Crumpled, unremarkable, folded into the quiet corner of her handbag as if paper could make itself small enough to be forgiven. The Copper Lantern, Lawrenceville. 2 cocktails. 2 entrees. Time, 11:52 p.m. There are reasonable explanations for nearly everything. Colleagues. A celebration for a client. A meal charged to the wrong card. But reason is a thin blanket when the night air moves in. I stood in her kitchen beneath the soft light over the sink and stared at that piece of paper as if staring long enough could bend it into a kinder shape. I returned it to her bag. I returned to my chair. I returned to the quiet story of us and tried to sit in it like an old coat that no longer fits across the shoulders. That night she slept heavy, her breath even, a faint line at the corner of her mouth that used to mean she'd eaten something too spicy. I watched the clock creep toward morning and told myself I was a rational man. Rational men do not go hunting through purses. They do not pinch themselves awake on a Tuesday and rewrite the lives they've built over a bartender's ink. Rational men stay with the facts and wait for more. More did not take long. It never does, once the first thread has been pulled. Her texts acquired a pattern, late, late, later. The scent on her scarf turned unfamiliar, then familiar in its unfamiliarity, the way a hotel room smells after other people have lived in it for weeks. My memory went to work, not as a friend but as a historian, cataloging every shift, the way she held her phone a little closer to her chest when a message arrived, the way she started locking the screen, a new habit for someone who used to leave it unguarded on the counter while she showered. Small things. Nothing you could hold up in a court of law. Everything you could hold up to your own heart and ask, is this still ours? There is a certain shame that comes with suspicion. It makes you secretive, and I have never liked the person I become when I am hiding, even if I'm only hiding from the possibility that my life is not what I think it is. I tried the Kinder narratives first. She deserves to blow off steam. They're under pressure at Halcyon. Not everything is about you. I repeated these like prayers and felt each one evaporate as soon as it touched the heat of a new absence. You can call it intuition if you like. I don't. I call it arithmetic. 2 dinners, 2 glasses, just before midnight. A woman who does not come home hungry tells me she barely ate. On a raw-edged Friday, steel sky, wind coming off the river in a way that made the windows complain, I lost the argument with myself. I asked her a question I pretended was casual. Where were you? I said, leaning on the doorframe of our bedroom as she rubbed her eyes. Late, she said. Office. We had to close out the week. Where? I heard the careful lightness in my own voice and hated it. Bar near the building, she yawned, nothing special. The Copper Lantern is not near downtown. It is exactly the kind of place you pick when you want to be warm, unnoticed, and far from anyone who recognizes your badge on sight. I smiled, because that is what a quiet life demands. I made coffee. I said, rest. I used the word we less in my head that morning than I had in years. I will say this plainly, I did not confront her because I was afraid of the answer. I did not confront her because I knew the answer, and knowing without proof felt like a failure I could still reverse. People like me rely on evidence. We fix bugs by reproducing them. We do not accuse, we replicate, confirm, document. It is a noble posture until you realize how much damage silence can do while you are building your perfect case. That weekend I cooked our Sunday pancakes with hands too careful, as if the batter might accuse me of something I could still take back. She laughed at a joke from the radio, and I could not find my way into the sound of it. I followed her the next week, not brazenly, not with the bravado of a man who believes himself a detective, but with the posture of a husband who has learned to drive behind the person he loves without being seen. She left at 6:40 p.m., kissed my cheek, told me, "Don't wait up, I'll grab something." I counted to 200 before I took my keys from the bowl by the door, a ritual that felt like an oath and a betrayal at once. The traffic thinned as we left Grant Street behind. She didn't veer toward the office towers. She cut across toward Lawrenceville, where the sidewalks were art and the bars know everyone's business but rarely say it out loud. I parked 2 blocks away from the Copper Lantern and became one more nobody in a city of nobodies who looked through windows at answers. Through the warm glass, the bar was a gold-lit river of small celebrations, a place where people laughed in a register just above the truth. And there she was, my wife, her hair smooth, her blouse chosen, her posture the kind you reserve for someone you want to be seen by. Across from her sat a man whose name I didn't have then, only the shape of him, well-dressed, easy smile, the kind of attention that doesn't have to shout to be heard. They leaned in. He took her hand for a moment longer than politeness requires. The world did not end. It pried. I did not walk in. I did not pound the table or say her name like a verdict. I lifted my phone, the way we all do when we don't know what else to do, and reached for proof. The lens gave me distance. The image gave me something I could no longer argue with. I snapped once, twice, and felt very old. Not because betrayal makes you age, though it does, but because certainty steals a man's excuses, and I had grown quietly fond of mine. Back home, the house did not recognize me. The lamp by the couch, a gift from her mother, threw the same soft oval on the carpet, but I stood at its edge like a stranger waiting to see if someone would offer him a seat. I opened the refrigerator, the light flicked on obediently. We had eggs, lemons, a jar of something I couldn't remember buying. I shut the door and leaned my forehead against the cool door seal until I felt foolish. Then I did the only thing that felt like action without requiring confrontation. I planned. Not revenge. Not yet. The word was too big for the shape my thinking took. I planned to know, fully, without loophole or kindness. I planned to be done with ambiguity. You should know that men like me, quiet, methodical, do not wake up cruel one morning. We make lists. We look up phone logs and company calendars and the city map like it might grant us absolution. I told myself I owed Sloane dignity, even in disbelief. Dignity meant patience. Patience meant silence. Silence meant more late nights, more perfume that wasn't ours, more lies told softly because soft words are easier to forgive. There are stories where the hero throws the door open and asks for the truth, and the truth arrives, messy and redeemable. This is not one of those stories. This is the story of a man who believed quiet was the same as safe, who learned the hard way that quiet is sometimes just the sound of a fracture before it speaks. I lay awake beside the person I had chosen for the rest of my life and counted the patterns I could no longer deny. 2 glasses on a bar tab at 11:52 p.m., a hand held a fraction too long, a city large enough to hide in, a marriage small enough to overlook its own wounds. When morning came, I brewed coffee like I always do. Habit is a religion I have never been able to quit. She padded into the kitchen in a sweatshirt with the sleeves pushed to her elbows, hair twisted into an easy knot. "Early?" she asked, smiling like any other morning. "Couldn't sleep," I said, and we both let the truth stand there between us like a chair no one wanted to move. She told me she had to be in early. "Big meeting," she said, and I nodded like a man who still believes meetings happen in rooms with glass walls and respectable chairs. I didn't ask about the bar. I didn't ask about the way she come home and set her purse down a little too carefully, as if it contained a bird with a fragile heart. I wanted, for one more day, to live inside the house I had built from routines and kindness and the belief that a marriage could be a fortress if you loved it well enough. But somewhere between the first sip and the second, I knew fortress wasn't the right word. Fortresses are loud when they fall. What we had was a chapel. And someone had started whispering in it at night. I wish I could say that I chose my next step with a noble heart. I didn't. I chose it with a tired one. I chose to follow the truth wherever it went, even if it walked me out of my own front door. I chose to hold my questions like stones behind my back until I knew exactly what to throw and when. And most of all, I chose to stop mistaking quiet for peace. There is peace, and then there is silence. One keeps you. The other keeps you blind. By the time the clock on the stove struck 8, I had washed our 2 coffee mugs and set them upside down on the rack in their usual places. It's a small detail, I know, but it matters to me where things return when they are finished being used. I looked at the mugs. I looked at the door she had just closed. I told myself the truth in a voice I could barely hear. Something is wrong, Graham. And the only way back from wrong is through it. I told myself I was a man of reason, a man who needed facts before he built accusations. But reason is a fragile shield when doubt eats at you night after night. The receipt was not enough. The laughter at the copper lantern, the hand held too long, those were not enough either. I needed something undeniable, something even Sloane couldn't explain away with one of her tired, charming smiles. So I became the kind of man I had once promised I would never be. I searched her car. It felt wrong at first, like trespassing in my own life. I opened the passenger door one morning after she left, the air inside still carrying a faint trace of her perfume mixed with leather and winter air. The glove box gave me nothing but a stack of old insurance papers, expired coupons, and a bottle of hand sanitizer. The side pockets offered a crumpled fast food wrapper and an extra pair of sunglasses I'd never seen her wear. Harmless. Almost laughable. And then, between a fold of papers in the console, my hand brushed something I couldn't mistake for anything else. A pack of condoms. Half empty. I froze, staring at it like it might disappear if I blinked hard enough. We hadn't used condoms in years. Not since the diagnosis. We never needed them again until now. My fingers curled around the box as if I could strangle the truth into silence. It didn't stop there. Wedged deep between 2 documents was something worse, something that sucked the air straight from my lungs, a used condom, wrapped clumsily in a tissue. Left behind. Forgotten. Proof so ugly, so final, that I dropped it back into the papers like it had burned me. In that moment, every doubt I had sheltered hardened into a truth so heavy I thought it might crush me where I stood. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This wasn't paranoia. This was betrayal in its most physical, undeniable form. I remember closing the car door gently, almost lovingly, like I was afraid the slam would wake the neighborhood. I walked back into the house on legs that didn't feel like mine, sat in my office chair, and pressed my palms to my eyes until colors burst behind the lids. A man can live with not knowing. He can live with suspicion, with the gnawing edge of doubt. But once you know, once you've held the proof in your hands, you become something else entirely. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was the audience to her double life. And the only thing I wanted then was to find him. The man who had taken what was mine, who had kissed her in the places where I used to believe I was the only one allowed. The following days I lived in two worlds. In one, I was still Graham Whitaker, the quiet husband who brewed the coffee and asked about her meetings, who kissed her cheek as she left 4 late nights at Halcyon Mutual. In the other, I was a shadow, following her tail lights across Pittsburgh, down streets that had nothing to do with offices or deadlines. I watched her park outside the Riverside Lofts one gray Thursday morning. I watched her glance at her phone, fingers tapping quick, nervous. And then I saw him, Evan Hale, though I didn't yet know his name, step out to meet her. Tall. Confident. A smile that carried no weight of guilt, no shadow of hesitation. She moved into his arms, and then their mouths found each other like they had done it 100 times before. I didn't rage. I didn't weep. I simply lifted my phone and captured the moment that would end our marriage. That night she came home with the same smile she had worn for years, set her purse down in the same corner, and kissed my cheek with lips I knew had touched his hours earlier. She called me love. I called her Sloane. We played our roles. But inside, I was already gone. Inside, I was already building the kind of case no one could deny, least of all her. This wasn't just about catching her in a lie anymore. It was about making her pay for every quiet morning, every pancake sundae, every small kindness she had poisoned with deceit. She had destroyed our fortress from the inside. I intended to salt the ground she had ruined. By the end of that week, I had called an attorney. By the end of that week, I had moved every dollar from our joint account into my name. And by the end of that week, I had drafted an email, cold, factual, devastating, to the HR department at Halcyon Mutual, attaching the photos from the Copper Lantern and the Riverside Lofts. The subject line was short, inappropriate relationship at work. My finger hovered for a moment, just a moment, over the send button. And then I clicked. The silence that followed was no longer the silence of a quiet life. It was the silence of a war about to begin. The first domino fell the moment I pressed send. I didn't have to wait long for the echo. By noon the next day, my phone lit up with Sloane's name. I let it ring until her voice dropped into voicemail, her silence thick with panic, before declining it altogether. Minutes later, another call. Then another. By the fourth, I answered, my voice calm, almost casual, though my chest felt like a furnace. Graham, she began, her words rushed, brittle. Something's wrong with our bank account. I couldn't pay at the store. I cut her off with a small smile she couldn't see. Yes, I said. I closed it. The pause on the line was exquisite, like a string pulled taut until it threatened to snap. You what? She hissed, her panic slipping into fury. I leaned back in my chair, savoring it. I moved everything into my own account. You spend recklessly, Sloane. Thought it was time someone handled the finances properly. She cursed, sharp and desperate, then demanded to know what I was doing. I let the silence stretch until I asked the question that had haunted me for weeks. Where were you last night? Her breath caught, just enough to tell me the truth before she spoke. At the office, she said flatly, like a student reciting a line from memory. I laughed, low and cold. Funny. Because I saw you. At Riverside Lofts. With Evan Hale. Another silence. And then the unraveling began. Her voice cracked as she tried to scramble for explanations, excuses, anything to plaster over the holes I'd carved open. Graham, please, it's not what you think. I cut her off again, my patience gone. I saw you kiss him. The words landed heavy. She broke then, tears spilling into the receiver, begging for me to listen, to let her explain, to forgive what she called a mistake. I let her sob. I let her words crash against the wall of my silence until she understood there was nothing left to salvage. Finally, I whispered the only truth that mattered. You destroyed us, Sloane. Now it's your turn to lose everything. And I hung up. That night, a new number flashed across my screen. The message burned white on black. You bastard. You ruined my job. I smiled. The email to HR had done its work. Halcyon Mutual had stripped her of the respectability she flaunted like armor. Her perfect office life was gone, her polished career in ashes. I typed one word in reply, karma. And then I blocked her. The quiet after that message was the first peace I had felt in weeks. But peace doesn't last when guilt begins to whisper. Alone in my kitchen, whiskey in hand, I found myself staring at the glow of my phone, not at her number but at the empty inbox. I thought of her team, people who had nothing to do with her choices, now caught in the fallout of an investigation that would spread like fire. I told myself she deserved every ounce of ruin. I told myself I was simply leveling the scales. And yet, a part of me wondered if I had crossed into something darker, something colder than justice. I silenced the thought with another drink, but it lingered like a ghost in the corner of the room, patient and unforgiving. The next morning, she came to the door. I had known she would. The knocks were frantic, desperate, and when I opened, she stood there stripped of the woman I had once admired. Her eyes were swollen, her hair unkempt, her voice a rasp of grief. "Please, Graham," she whispered, clutching the frame as if the house might still welcome her back. "Let me explain. Let me fix this." I looked at her and felt no warmth, no mercy. Only the satisfaction of a man who had been betrayed and now held all the power. I told her what she didn't want to hear. That she had lost me. That she had lost everything. And when I handed her the divorce papers, her hands trembled as if I had given her a death sentence. She begged, wept, reached for me like a drowning woman reaching for air. I shut the door, and her sobs bled through the wood like rain against glass. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like the fool. I felt like the executioner. Still, as I leaned against the door and listened to her collapse on the other side, a question surfaced, uninvited and unwelcome. When this was all over, when the papers were signed and her life dismantled, what would be left of me? The days that followed were a blur of silence and strategy. I thought I had seen the worst already, the late nights, the lies, the bar, the lofts, but I hadn't. One evening, when she returned to the house with swollen eyes and a trembling voice, she didn't bring excuses this time. She brought a truth that cracked the floor beneath me. She was pregnant. The word hung in the air like a verdict, and in that instant, every last trace of denial died. I had been declared infertile. There was no miracle here, no late-blooming chance. This child, the one she carried with shaking hands on a stick she tried to hide, was not mine. It was his. Evan's. The final confirmation that what we had built was not only broken, it was replaced. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I simply stared at her, my lips pressed into a line so thin I thought it might cut through skin. She cried, begged, tried to tell me it meant nothing, that the child didn't change the love she felt for me. But love doesn't survive lies this deep. Love doesn't survive when a man has to stand in his own home and look at the evidence that he has been made redundant in every way that matters. She thought my silence was forgiveness. She didn't understand it was the sound of my heart locking shut for good. The next morning, I met with my attorney again. My instructions were simple: strip her of everything. No assets, no alimony, no chance to tether herself to my life anymore. My lawyer, a man with eyes as sharp as a scalpel, nodded without judgment. He had seen this kind of war before. What he hadn't seen was the coldness in me, the way I spoke with the precision of someone discussing a business deal instead of a marriage. I had loved her once. Now, she was only a liability to cut loose. Still, at night, doubt slithered in. Not doubt about her betrayal, that was undeniable, but about myself. About the man I was becoming. I had always believed in fairness, in measured responses. But sending that email to her company, destroying her career in front of colleagues who had trusted her, had left a sour taste I couldn't wash away. It wasn't just Sloane who had paid the price. Her team, innocent of her secrets, now bore the shadow of scandal. I told myself she deserved ruin. But when I pictured the frightened looks of people who had once respected her, I wondered if I had gone too far. Justice had turned into punishment, and punishment had turned into destruction. And destruction never ends neatly. She showed up again one night, standing on the porch with rain dripping from her hair, holding herself like a penitent begging at the gates. She pleaded through the door, voice raw, that she loved me, that the pregnancy didn't erase us, that she would give up everything else if I only gave her another chance. I opened the door long enough for her to see my face, long enough for her to realize there was no door left to open. I told her the truth, that she had already been replaced, not by another woman, but by the man I had become, the man she had created through every lie, every kiss she gave to someone else. Then I closed the door and let her sob into the night. For the first time, I understood something frightening. My revenge was nearly complete, yet instead of triumph, there was only emptiness. She was falling apart before my eyes, but I couldn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. All I felt was the slow realization that once she was gone, all that would be left was me and the hollow silence I had carved out of myself. The divorce process moved like a blade, clean, merciless, final. My lawyer filed the papers, and within weeks, Sloane's world had shrunk to ashes. She called less often now, her messages shorter, weaker, as if even her desperation had run dry. When she did find the courage to show up again, she no longer looked like the woman who had once dazzled conference rooms and board meetings. She looked hollow, a shadow with mascara streaks and trembling lips. She said my name like it was the last lifeline left to her. But by then, my name no longer belonged to her. It belonged to me, and I had no intention of letting her carry it into whatever ruin she was building. I told her to sign the papers. And when she did, her signature didn't look like hers at all, more like the last breath of someone who had finally drowned. Yet even as I watched her crumble, I began to feel the weight of my own choices pressing back. The email to Alcian had done more damage than I wanted to admit. Colleagues who had trusted her, who had relied on her, now looked at her like she was a stain on their work. Some had lost projects, others had been pulled into HR interrogations they didn't deserve. It wasn't only Sloane who had paid for her affair, it was anyone who had stood close enough to her when the blast wave hit. I told myself she had earned this, that betrayal deserved no mercy. But when I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling fan turning shadows across my walls, I wondered if I had gone beyond justice and become something far colder. I tried to quiet those doubts with action. I emptied what remained of our joint life, clothes she'd left behind, photos and frames that once held memories but now only mocked me. I boxed them up and left them on the curb for the garbage truck. Neighbors saw, and I didn't care. Let them wonder. Let them know. I was done hiding shame behind closed doors. She had humiliated me in whispers and shadows. I would erase her in the open daylight. And yet, when I stood in the silence of that emptied house, there was no applause, no victory. Only quiet, heavy and unrelenting. Weeks slipped into a routine of whiskey at night and work by day, a cycle as predictable as the betrayal that had broken me. People at work said I looked sharper, leaner, more focused, but the truth was simpler. I had nothing left to distract me. No late-night laughter, no Sunday rituals, no woman's voice filling the silence with warmth. Only me, my thoughts, and the haunting realization that revenge doesn't end with triumph, it ends with emptiness. The fortress I thought I protected had collapsed, and I was standing in the rubble holding pieces I no longer wanted. And yet, part of me clung to the cold satisfaction of knowing that Sloane had lost everything: her marriage, her job, her reputation, her chance at the life she pretended we were building together. She had traded loyalty for lies, family for fleeting moments in bars and lofts. Now she lived in ruins of her own making. And still, even as I told myself I was free of her, I couldn't shake the echo of one truth: in destroying her, I had destroyed something in myself too. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I carried the last box out of the house and handed over the keys. The rooms echoed with emptiness, every corner stripped of the laughter and quiet rituals that had once defined us. I thought walking away would feel like victory, like liberation, but instead it felt like stepping out of a church that had already burned down, silent, ruined, lifeless. I drove across Pittsburgh that night with the windows cracked, the cold air biting, and settled into a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. No shared furniture, no framed photos, no reminders of what had been. Just me, a mattress, and a bottle of whiskey on the counter. Sloane had vanished from my life. Halcyon Mutual had cut her loose. Evan Hale, the man she'd thrown it all away for, disappeared as soon as the scandal became public. And the pregnancy, whether it was carried on or quietly ended, I never asked, never wanted to know. Whatever future she imagined with him had dissolved in the same storm that ruined her career and her name. She was a ghost now, haunting only my memories when the nights grew too still. And me? I was free, yes, but freedom has a way of feeling heavier than chains when it comes too late. I poured myself a drink and stared out at the city lights blinking along the river. For the first time in months, I tried to measure what I had left. Not her. Not the fortress of marriage I once believed unshakable. Only myself. And I realized something that night: I hadn't won. There were no winners in this kind of war. I had survived. That was all. Survival is quieter than I imagined, lonelier too, but it is honest. And maybe honesty is the only foundation worth building on after lies have razed everything else to the ground. I raised my glass to the silence, to the man I had become, to the life I hadn't chosen but now had to claim. She had betrayed me, yes, but in the end, she had freed me. And as the whiskey burned its way down, I let myself believe that even broken men can build again, as long as they never confuse silence with peace.
Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, shocked you, or simply made you think, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment, your thoughts, your story, your truth. Subscribe for more raw, real, and unforgettable confessions. And if this story made you feel seen, share it. Someone else might need to hear it too. You're not alone here. This channel is a safe space for those who've been betrayed, broken, and rebuilt.